Coming up next on Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable, we'll look at the 2014 election results and try to figure out what to expect from the winners, and we'll discuss what new leadership in the state legislature will mean at the Capitol. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining us tonight, Jim Small of the Arizona Capital-Times, Jeremy Duda, also from the Arizona Capital-Times, and Bob Christie of the Associated Press. Election season is finally over. Jim, thoughts on just thoughts.
Well, the good news for most people is they can turn on the TV, not on PBS obviously, but turn on the TV and not be barraged with campaign ads and not have them stuffing their mailboxes and quickly going into the recycle bin. So, I guess we save some trees and save some pain on the TV commercials. But other than that, this election really was nationally it was a Republican wave, and in Arizona we saw it was a Republican wave. And I think at the end of the day it really comes down to turnout and voter enthusiasm. And Republicans had more excitement. They wanted to go to the polls. They had something to go to the polls, to a statement to make, and I don't think Democrats did. And the results you saw was, a drubbing in the governor's race and pretty much up and down the ticket, where Democrats are going to be left outside looking in once again.
Indeed. Thoughts, Jeremy, on what you saw Tuesday night?
Not too many surprises. I mean, the few that you saw, there were two statewide races that I think Democrats by election day were looking at as something that they could win. The Secretary of State's race, Superintendent of Public Instruction. Secretary of State, Goddard lost by 5 points. I think that was kind of surprising. That was the one statewide race I kind of thought they might win. And Democrats what they're really taking pretty hard is the superintendent's race. They had put all this hope in David Garcia. They felt like he was the more qualified candidate over Diane Douglas. She kind of disappeared from public view. He had all these endorsements, Chamber of Commerce support, everything he basically could have had going for him except for party registration. And the race is still technically too close to call, but it looks like Douglas is still going to pull this out.
Yeah, it does. Surprised me. The top line was the Ducey win, which was 12%, which is huge. The general thought was, okay, he's up by 6, he's up by 8, maybe he's up by 9, but 12 points is big. Now, down ticket on the statewide races, the closest you got was Terry Goddard, who came within 4 points or was beaten by 4 points by Michelle Reagan. And right below that, Diane Douglas, which, as Jeremy said, is technically for us, it's too close to call. He's got about a 20,000 vote deficit to make up. We've generally, the thinking we do race calls, and the thinking on that is, and unless there's some massive wave, he can't make up that deficit.
Jim, you mentioned turnout was a big deal. Republicans, better candidates, better campaigns? If the Democrats had run better candidates or had run better campaigns, would it have made a difference?
It might have. I mean, I think that there's an argument to be made that the Republican turnout machine worked better than the Democratic one. Although, without a doubt, turnout was depressed. We're going to see probably what will end up being the second lowest turnout rate since 1942. That was when the Secretary of State started keeping these records. Only once before has it ever been below 50%, was in 1998. We're probably going to be at about 46, 47% this time. It was very low across the board. I think you could probably make an argument that had the Democrats and Democrat-leaning voters been more engaged and had more enthusiasm to vote, whether that was because of efforts of the party or just because of messaging or just kind of the general tone of the election, that we probably wouldn't have seen turnout be quite as low.
Impact of money on this election?
I don't think that can really be understated. And when you look at these outside groups and how much they spent, there's so much on the Republican side and so little on the Dem side. And a lot of that may be a function of it being a Republican year and this being a Republican state, and maybe the Democrats not having the candidates that everyone would want, and maybe some people saying we're not going to spend our money. The Democratic Governors Association spent about $150,000 in this race while they focused all their money on these big races in other states. The Republican Governors Association, $5 million. You basically saw an 8-to-1 spending disparity in outside spending in the governor's race. Secretary of State's race, you had $600,000 in outside money in favor of Michelle Reagan, nothing for Terry Goddard. And of course, in the superintendent's race, you had 800,000 for Garcia, the Democrat, and pretty much nothing for Douglas. It still didn't matter, but that was the closest race. So money clearly had, and outside money more than anything, clearly had a tremendous impact.
But again, considering the tsunami for the Republicans, would it have made a difference if that money were a little more evened out in this particular election?
Maybe not in the statewide races. I mean, if you look at the congressional races, and we haven't talked about them yet, we have 3 competitive congressional races where Democrats were defending seats where they were considered extremely vulnerable. National Republicans poured in millions. CD1 was the 3rd most spending in the U.S. for a congressional seat. CD2 was 4th. Ann Kirkpatrick ran away with that race. She made by 5
You surprised by
points.
that?
I was surprised it was that. What I really was surprised by was Kristen Sinema's 12.5% victory in what many considered as, maybe it's a tiny bit Democratic leaning, but it's a swing district. I think the Republican candidate there, Wendy Rogers, just had no traction. She had no backing at all. The Republicans looked at that district and said, we don't think we can win it. And I think that the attack ads against her that were run by the Democratic groups were extremely effective in that race.
And we should mention that CD2 race still has not been decided. Do we have any latest numbers on that thing?
I think the latest numbers were Martha McSally is up by about 770 votes or so.
772. She was ahead by about 1,300 votes last night, and then this morning it turned a little bit, and it got down to 363 by the end of last night. Then Cochise County came in with their earlies, and that put her back up to 772. But they're done with their earlies except for their provisionals. They have about 1,200 provisionals left in Cochise County to count. In Pima County,
More liberal Pima County.
More liberal Pima County voted 52 to 48% for Barber. There's 24,000 outstanding votes there. And I expect by the time that we're done with this show and we check, Pima County will come in, and it's highly likely that Barber will be up. He might hold it.
Why did we see so much competition and even different results in these congressional races regarding party as opposed to the statewide? Is it just simply a matter of money?
It might be. This is the one place in the state where the money was pretty even between the two parties, but at least in CD1 and CD2, not at 9 where the National Republicans kind of abandoned Rogers early on, but in 1 and 2, both sides threw everything they had at those races, and it's the one place we saw the Democrats holding on, potentially, possibly holding on to both of those seats, at least holding on to one of them. And statewide, it's hard to say. If the resources had been equal, you would have seen a different outcome. I think if there'd been more money on the Dem side, this is still a Republican year. Right? Elsewhere in the country, both sides threw everything they had at a lot of these big races, and the Republicans still won almost all of these big races nationwide.
Kirkpatrick was thrown out of office in 2010 during the Tea Party wave. We didn't have that as much this year. And people like their congresspeople, generally speaking. They throw them out of office from time to time, but both Kirkpatrick, Ron Barber, and Kristen Sinema have run to the middle for the last 2 years, knowing that they're going to get a major challenge. Ann Kirkpatrick has been in that district. It's a huge, sprawling district, and she's out in some little town in eastern Arizona every weekend. Kristen Sinema is doing the same. Ron Barber's doing the same, and I think it paid off.
Agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it really does speak to the power of incumbency at a certain point. And also, I don't think you can discount the candidates that they were running against. Obviously, Martha McSally battle tested. This is her third race in 3 years in that district. But like Bob said, Wendy Rogers, I think, was definitely not a top-tier candidate for the Republicans. I think there weren't a lot of Republicans that really gave her much of a shot at winning. And in the CD1 race, Andy Tobin was certainly the favored candidate for the establishment of the Republican Party, but there was a lot of criticism of the campaign that he ran, and a widespread belief that he, had there been a better run campaign, that race may have been closer.
Interesting. All right, let's get now to the fact that John Kyle, the former Senator Kyle, is leading the Ducey transition team. A transition team, how much change will we see in the Ducey administration? Anyone from the Brewer administration going to make that leap?
It's possible. I've heard 1, maybe 2 names of people that Brewer staffers, top aides, who are speculated as possibly sticking around. I know people tell me that Michael Hunter wants to stick around. And
Who is he?
He's one of the governor's top aides, big tax expert. From what I hear, is a Ducey supporter. But this is just rumor and speculation right now. You know, a new governor, you're going to want to put in your people, the people you know, the people you trust, and the best people for the job. And that's what these transition teams really do: is you go out and find who these people are, who you're going to put in your administration, your chief of staff, the top aides below them. This, as we saw, I think, early in the Brewer administration, this makes a difference. This can, help. If this doesn't run smoothly, then your administration really doesn't run smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to get somebody in place. You need to get people in place in these top positions who know how state government runs, who've been there before, who don't go in there and just try to knock everything over, but let things run, make the policy decisions. Make sure that the personnel decisions are run right, and work with the legislature. And that's going to be critical, because first thing out of the box, they're going to be working with the legislature to fix this year's budget, and you better have the right people in place.
As far as coattails, those sorts of things, do you see that, does Ducey just kind of want to come in there and maybe put new curtains up and put new tile down and just start fresh? Or how much does he have holdover from the Brewer administration in the Brewer years?
Holdover in terms of what?
In terms of policy, in terms of people?
I think, people, I think Jeremy's right. I mean, there might be a couple top staff, but for the most part, I think it's going to be kind of a new crew and, a whole new group of people. And in terms of policies, I think, generally he's been pushing a lot of the same things, although I think the big difference between Governor Brewer and a Governor Ducey when it comes to some of these more conservative policies, I think you're going to see Ducey probably be a little bit more proactive. He certainly struck that tone in the campaign that he was going to, really kind of set the stage for here's kind of the things that I want to do and the things that I want to accomplish. And while Governor Brewer was certainly proactive and had those issues that she went out and fought for, I think by and large those issues tended to be against the grain of the rest of her party in the legislature. I don't know that we're going to necessarily see that from Doug Ducey.
No, I think the expectation a lot of folks have is, like you said, Ducey to be a very proactively conservative governor. I think he has, ideas about Trump wanting to do some big things. Brewer, while she was conservative on most things, the times where she really stuck her neck out and spent her political capital were on more centrist issues. I don't know that Ducey is going to be like that as much, and it'll be interesting to see what he does in this first term. Obviously he talked a lot about tax cuts, but he's acknowledged this, can't do this for years because of the budget situation. So then you have to start looking at what can you do that's not really going to cause any budget problems, but it'll still be, kind of a, big conservative issue. I think a lot of people are expecting maybe some movement on school choice. A couple of people speculated stuff like pensions, tort reform, union stuff. It's kind of hard to say, but these are things that could be done without kind of aggravating the budget situation, possibly.
Or aggravating the legislature. We might as well get right now to Senate and House leadership. Who is David Gowan? What kind of impact has he had in his service so far? What do you expect now?
Well, David Gowan's been the majority leader for the last 2 years. He is Andy Tobin's right-hand man. Andy left, so David solidified his people around the leadership. There were 3 people who wanted to be speaker.
How come? Why did he win over those other people?
He won because he's a coalition builder, and that's what you have to do to win. I think if you look at the other 2 candidates, J.D. Mesnard and Eddie Farnsworth, one senator both from the Phoenix area, I think that they probably had angered a few people over the years, and Gowan maybe hadn't. David Gowan's from Sierra Vista. He's a conservative, fiscal conservative, and it'll be interesting to see how that comes together with what gets pushed. Now, what he did do is he put some people in place in his leadership, in the second tier of leadership. Bob Robson is rumored to be set up Speaker Pro Tem. He's part of the Medicaid coalition, and some of the other moderates feel pretty good that they'll keep chairmanships. So
was that part of the deal, do you think?
Yeah, from what we'd heard a couple months ago when this deal had reportedly got instructed, those were some of the conditions for it. And we'll kind of see how that shakes out, I think, over the next coming 2, 3, 4 weeks.
Do you think Gowan's more in line maybe with the more conservative Andy Biggs over in the Senate than Tobin was?
Yeah, I think ideologically he is. I think that they have more in common on that than maybe Biggs and Tobin did. But it's always tough, and this is something certainly Andy Biggs has experienced, is when you get you at a certain point kind of have to put your personal ideologies and your personal beliefs aside on some issues, because you have to represent the will of your caucus, the will of your body. And so I think every new leader always grapples with that, and that's always kind of that transition of going from someone who is a backbencher who can take those kinds of stands and maybe throw some of those bombs into leadership, where they kind of have to subjugate their own beliefs for the beliefs of the body.
And over in the Senate now, President Biggs remains Steve Montenegro, the majority leader, and we have David Livingston, the majority whip. Why those two gentlemen?
Well, over in the House, I think that shows you that this is still, whatever deals are cut with the more moderate members in the House, this is still a pretty conservative caucus. Montenegro and Livingston, very conservative members, and I think that probably tells you a lot about what kind of direction the caucus is going to be going.
Yeah, sorry, I meant the House as opposed to the Senate. I don't want to scare anybody out there. But wasn't Livingston? Wasn't he the guy that went up to the Bundy Ranch?
He went up to he is extremely conservative. During the Medicaid expansion fight, he sat up for a half an hour railing about how we got to cut the budget. This is crazy. We can't be doing this. He is a big conservative, fiscal conservative. He wants to cut the budget. And he's probably going to get his chance. We're facing $1 billion in budget cuts. Montenegro was the sponsor of a bill last year that would have allowed anyone to opt out of performing a gay marriage. And of course, pastors already can, but state officials, a county clerk, for instance. This is a bill that many people considered wasn't necessary because there's already those opt-outs there. But he pushed it as a religious conservative, and he ended up pulling it. Over in the Senate, where Andy Biggs was reelected as Senate president, the majority leader is Steve Yarborough, who is the architect of Senate Bill 1062.
Interesting. We also have Gail Gerfen from, I believe it's Hereford, the majority whip. I mean, again, Ms. Griffin, Yarborough, these are conservatives with a capital C.
No, and once again, this shows you, a pretty conservative direction. The last 2 years, Biggs has been Senate president, and obviously a very conservative member, one of the most conservative members over there. But they'd had a couple of the more moderate members, John McComish and Adam Driggs, in those other two leadership positions. Now they're out of those now. You have, Yarborough and Griffin, both very conservative. You know where they stand. So, it shows maybe a little bit more of a new direction there, and maybe a little more agreement. The Senate Republican caucus for the last couple of years has been very fractured. When Andy Biggs first got elected president over there, it's very, very divisive. It was came down to a matter of one vote. Someone, still no one's quite sure who, kind of stabbed Steve Pearson in the back. But, this time it was unanimous. It took about a minute to pick these three people for leadership. So that might signal maybe a little more smooth sailing over there.
So with that in mind, talk about how this legislature, with this leadership, this makeup, works with a Governor Ducey. I mean, how long will the honeymoon period how long is that going to last?
Good question. I don't know. We'll see what kinds of policies Governor Ducey proposes. One of my colleagues spoke with Andy Biggs today, and Biggs said, look, I'm really hopeful that we can work together, that we can put out that myself and Speaker Gowan and Governor Ducey can work together, and we can put out a budget, maybe rather than everyone kind of doing their own thing, we can get on the same page, put out a proposal, and kind of fast track this thing through the legislature. But, it doesn't take, it seems like it was that long ago, but back in 2009 when Governor Brewer came into office, I think there was a lot of expectation that, from the Republican leadership team, that wow, we don't have to deal with Janet Napolitano anymore. This is going to be great. We're going to be able to have smooth sailing, and things did not necessarily work out that way, and so it's always kind of something we're gonna have to wait and see. Although certainly all indications are right now, at least from what people are saying, that these guys are all going to be able to get along together.
But as we know from Jan Brewer, conservative as she is a pragmatist. She understood she decided what she felt the state needed budget-wise, and she pushed back. Andy Biggs I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he says, I just want somebody I can work with, because he was not able to work with the governor very well, the current governor.
I think they'll, at least initially, they'll probably be able to get along. Brewer and the legislature, very quickly developed this combative relationship, and that kind of carried on for 6 years. Doug Ducey isn't going to come in and push for a tax hike. We know that much right now.
So if he's not going to push for, I hate to interrupt you here, but if he's not going to push for a tax hike, how are they going to handle this budget?
Nobody seems to know so far. You have, I think, a $9.2 billion budget where about 2/3 of it is basically off limits. They can't touch it. I mean, you have, $3 million, and universities is pretty much the biggest pot of that. That's probably going to get some cuts, but you can't cut it all from there. No one knows where you can make these cuts, but no one's quite sure where you can get other money. We've, all these kind of one-time kind of out-of-the-box solutions we came up with during the last crisis, a lot of these aren't available. We've securitized lottery revenue. We can't resell the buildings we've sold. A lot of the funds that we swept haven't really been replenished as much as they used to be. And you talk to, I remember talking to both the gubernatorial campaigns a couple weeks about this, and neither Doug Ducey nor Fred Duvall had the slightest idea what they were going to do with this. Legislative leaders like John Kavanaugh, no idea what they're going to do with this. Nobody really has any idea.
Yeah, it's going to be an extremely difficult job for the new leadership team in the executive level and in the legislature.
All right, let's get to some of the other statewide races while we have time here. Mark Brnovich obviously succeeding Tom Horn. How will that be different, do you think?
I think Tom Horn for the past 4 years really was kind of using that office to look for higher office, to run for governor. I think that was always the expectation, was that 2014 he would have been amongst the field of Republicans, and so there was certainly some decisions that were made, and some of the things that we've heard characterized by some folks as grandstanding that happened in that office that seemed designed to try to craft an image for him to run for higher office. I don't know if Mark Brnovich has any designs on running for higher office. Certainly, with the Republican in the governor's seat, you got 8 years there, so there may be a little bit less of that. He seems a little bit more low profile, less of a veteran politician certainly than a guy like Tom Horn was.
We probably will see some more aggressive action against the federal government. He's criticized Tom Horn for not suing the federal government, not joining a bunch of other Republican attorney generals and suing over EPA rules. You can expect that on January 10th when he's
Whenever they get sworn in.
yeah, whenever he's sworn in, and other similar.
Okay, how will Michelle Reagan differ from Ken Bennett at the Secretary of State's office?
That's a little harder to say. I mean, some of this will depend on what kinds of things she's going to try and get the legislature to do. There's very little you can really do to affect policy within the Secretary of State's duties. But you can push issues, and we've seen the last few secretaries of state do that. Michelle Reagan has had some ambitious legislation in the past few years, some ambitious ideas, but she's kind of dialed a lot of that back. She ran a bill earlier this year to require disclosure of dark money. She's not looking to do it, doesn't want to do that anymore. She said, her experience running that bill kind of taught her that there's a lot we can't do. She ran that bill that ended up as part of that omnibus bill that was repealed that would prohibit the practice of, ballot harvesting, as she calls it, these door-to-door early ballot collections. She's told us last week she's not really looking to do that anymore. She wants, a signed authorization by both the voter and the ballot collector to establish a chain of custody, but doesn't want to prohibit the practice anymore. So it's hard to say what kind of, major, I don't know if we're going to see some major changes under her, but.
Okay, then let's get to the education department here. Diane Douglas, how will she differ from John Huppenthal? And please, don't mention blogging.
She probably won't blog. She will be lucky if we ever see her based on the campaign. But that unfair criticism aside, I think that the first thing she's going to do is put people into that department that mirror her philosophy. Conservative, pushback against the federal government. The problem with the education department is you're basically a funnel for federal dollars. So what federal dollars do you turn away? And then the second thing that they do is they help with curriculum for the schools around the state. Do they completely redo the Ames test, or the new test?
Yeah.
Do they get rid of Common Core? And she can't do that alone. She's got to get the Board of Education on board to do that.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, and that's the one thing is this job in a lot of ways is we've elected an office manager, like an agency head. It's someone who does have a vote on the Board of Education, but only one of many. The other thing that the Department of Education does that's really a big thing is collect and disseminate data from schools, from testing, from grades, from school performance, all that stuff. And that's another big thing. That was something I know that John Huppenthal really pushed for when he was in the legislature in terms of revamping this data systems. And also, really, that was one of his top priorities in the last 4 years. And so, I think that's something that will probably continue on. But it's, in terms of managing this agency, I think it's a large bureaucracy.
Okay,
Right.
we got to stop right here. But I do want to ask one simple question: yes or no, for all the teachers out there that are concerned. You think Common Core survives?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think so.
You think so? Bob, you think
No, I think it's gone.
You think so?
Yeah.
All right. Teachers would love to hear that one. Gentlemen, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Monday on Arizona Horizon, former Ambassador Kurt Volker will join us to discuss the latest in foreign affairs, and we'll hear about an ASU initiative to prevent child bullying. That's Monday on the next Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.